Right then, let's go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football Podcast powered by MK Battery. As always, a huge thank you to MK Battery for their continued support of the podcast and of Powerchair Football across England. Their backing helps drive visibility at every level of the game and allows us to tell stories of the players shaping the sport right now. My name is Ryan Sipple, and today I'm joined by one of the most exciting young players in world Powerchair Football. At just 16 years of age, he's already competing consistently at the very highest level, starring for Aspire in the domestic game and representing England on the international stage, testing himself against the best players and clubs in the world across major tournaments. We'll be reflecting on competitions he's already been a part of and what he's taken from them, what's challenged him the most, and where he hopes to go next, both in the immediate future and over the long term. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Dan McLellan to the podcast. Dan, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Just about recovering after Christmas. But yeah, I think it was a really important time to sort of rest because we've had such a hectic schedule over the past year with all the competitions going on. As we spoke about earlier, obviously you commentated on all of them, and you'll know that as much as we all love it, sometimes you do need a little bit of a break to rest and recharge, and then go ahead in the new year.
Yeah, it was an incredibly busy 2025. We had, of course, the Nations Cup, the Club World Cup, the conclusion of the domestic league and cup competitions here as well. So Christmas was long overdue, but gave us all an opportunity to just recharge the batteries ahead of hopefully an equally as important and successful 2026. Now, I've wanted to sit down with you for a long time because when people talk about you now, it's normally the headlines. At 16, I'm right in saying you're still 16, aren't I?
Yeah, I'm turning 17 tomorrow as we record this.
Are you really?
Yeah, for now I'm 16.
Okay, this will be going out on your birthday. So let's as we record it now, you are 16. You've already experienced more than most people will across a whole career. If you actually list all of the competitions you've played in, the Premiership, the Championship, the WFA Cup, the South East Regional League, the West Midlands Regional League, the Champions Cup, the Club World Cup, and that's just club level. Does that cover them all?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Internationally, you've got the development and senior home nations, plus the Nations Cup and the World Cup as well. And when you say it one after the other, it almost doesn't feel real. You played in every major competition the sport has to offer. But even with all of that, what I'm interested in isn't necessarily that list. It's everything behind it. What it felt like to be introduced to the sport, what you've had to learn along the way, what's been difficult, what surprised you, what's kept you grounded as things have moved at such a pace that's rare for anyone, never mind someone your age. So we'll talk about Aspire, we'll talk about England, the sport in a more broader sense, and what each kind of environment has taught you along the way. So whenever I speak to players who've gone on to achieve big things in the sport, they all remember the start, the beginning, not the first trophy, not the first England camp, not the first goal, but the first time they almost sat in a sports chair and realized this is a potential avenue to explore. That moment where the sport stops being something to try and becomes something you could potentially get really good at. And for people listening now, they'll know you as a player who looks completely at home at the top end of the game, but you weren't born into that version of yourself. There was a first session, a first coach, a first time you felt you belonged. So how did Powerchair Football first come into your life? What do you remember most and most clearly about that first experience?
Well, obviously, I absolutely loved football. any form of football since sort of my first sort of consciousness, as long as I can remember. Um, and I was always trying to join in with football when I was a kid. So when I was at school, I'd maybe sit in goal, and when I was at home, I'd sit on the end of the decking and have a goal behind me and dive around and try and save it. And that was good as sort of a stopgap to keep my love of football going and my passion. Um, but you can't quite get the feeling of contentness that you want, I don't think, from doing that. So I felt like I wanted more, and I really wanted to play football in the same way that everyone else does, competing really where everyone is the same and you're not the person that no one wants on their team. Um, so my parents were sort of always advocating for me, and I think they were sort of looking out for opportunities, and they heard about Powerchair Football, and so I went down to Northampton, and Northamptonshire, who I believe are now, I follow them on Facebook, and I think they're now sort of playing in the cup each year, and I think they play in the West Midlands League as well. So, but at that time, they didn't play in any of the leagues or the cups, and they were just purely sort of training. I think it was once a fortnight on a Sunday, and so I went along there, and that was in the storm chairs. So I tried it out in a storm chair, and actually, this might sound pretty crazy, but I didn't fall in love with it the first time I played it. And it's interesting because obviously everyone will know Chris Gordon that's listening to this. And I spoke to him about it a couple of years ago when I was sort of first in around the England squad, and we were all getting to know each other. And he said that he had the exact same situation where at first I was a bit sort of apprehensive. I don't know if it was the fact about the different size ball or the rules looking a bit different or anything, but I just was like, oh, this isn't football. I don't really want to play it anymore. But obviously, my parents are amazing, and it was especially, I think, my mum told me that I should stick with it for even just one more week, because I think I was about 8 or 9 at this point, and every kid of that age, they don't want to listen to what their parents telling them. But my mum did tell me to stick with it, and if I really don't like it after that next session, then I don't have to carry on. But then I went back, and I absolutely loved it. And from then on, it was just I carried on training in my storm at Northampton, and then it was actually I was going to pick up with my dad at Sevenoaks. I think they were selling, so I was using like a club Northampton chair at that point, and I think they were selling at Sevenoaks storm chairs that they had from. I think they'd all moved on to the Strike Force at that point. So I think this is around 2018. So that was when people were sort of transitioning into the Strike Force, and so Sevenoaks was selling up their old storm chairs, and I went and I bought one of those, and then I think that was when I sort of it clicked for me that I've got my own chair now. There really actually might be a path where I carry on playing this and really look for a career in it. And yeah, so I carried on playing, and it was and then we heard about Aspire. And so it was a really similar situation. I went to Aspire. They had at the time um an Aspire Lions team, which was the real development team that just played regionally. And then those 3 teams: Evergreen, Muscle Warriors, and Aspire. So you had Evergreen and Muscle Warriors who were in the championship at the time, and Aspire in the Premiership. But obviously, they all trained at the same venue in Watford at the time. So I went along, and had a session with the Aspire Lions, and it was it was just a classic session. I was using one of the club DB Bullet chairs, and yeah, so I trained. I had a good time. I thought, didn't really think much of it, and then it ended up that was with the Aspire Lions team. But I think we played a game against Evergreen at the end of the session, and I must have just maybe made a good contact on a few passes or whatever. But it ended up that Ross Baker, who I think he does a bit of, I saw him at linesmaning at the last Prem, I think, because Nicky's obviously playing for Villa this year. I think he's sort of started getting involved again, and with the Premiership. So he called my mum up or my dad on the Friday night before the Championship Nationals and said, "We need an extra player. I can't guarantee that you'll play all the minutes, but we just need someone to come and make up the numbers." And so that for me, I was like, oh, I get to make up the numbers in the championship. And I was absolutely buzzing with that. And I think that was my first, so that was my first sort of taste of being in like a team where I was playing competitively. And so I went up on the Sunday of that weekend just for one day and played a bit for Evergreen. And even though I didn't necessarily know about the tactics or where I needed to be or anything, that sort of adrenaline rush for even just being on the pitch in a real game where it actually mattered and it wasn't just training, that really, I think, strengthened my desire to improve even more. And yeah, so after that weekend where I just filled in for Evergreen, I I ended up then getting sort of asked to just for the rest of the season. You know what, you did okay when you came up, so we'll have you for the rest of the season. And yeah, so that was where it sort of stemmed. And then from then on, for the rest of that season, I was at Evergreen.
Going back to those early sessions with Northampton and starting within the Aspire hub, what kept you coming back, do you think? Was it the sport itself? Was it the sense of competition? Maybe you saw progress in your game, or was it kind of everything mixed together?
I think it was everything mixed together, but if I had to pick one thing in particular, I think the particular focus was probably the competition because I'd always loved anything competitive, even if it's just Uno or, anything like that. And I loved football. So mixing that sort of competitiveness, even though it wasn't exactly like the football that I'd seen before and wanted to replicate, it was the feeling was exactly the same as I imagined the players got when they come out and the crowd's roaring at an Arsenal game or at any big team's game. And so that was what I'd always known. And so I think, yeah, being able to replicate that competitive feeling that I'd imagined all of those footballers that I'd watched on TV sort of had felt was a big part of it for me, I think.
I don't think your experience of not necessarily gelling with the sport at your first introduction of it is uncommon at all. I see it a lot. And I think the version of Powerchair football you was introduced to with regards to the Storms and the older iterations of the chairs, I think that plays a significant role because the version that you were introduced to compared to what we are playing in 2026 now is chalk and cheese. But when you first started, did you feel competitive straight away, or did that kind of develop as you gained more confidence within the chair?
I think it sort of developed, as you say, when I developed more sort of confidence and natural ability in the chair, because obviously at first, I think I was sort of trying to get to grips with it more than anything. And I think it's the same with every skill. Um, with anything in life, it starts off as a bit of a fun thing. You don't think massively about when you're not doing it, and you don't obsess about. You don't think about it when you're not doing it. You just sort of do it, have a bit of fun, and then get on with the rest of your day. And I think it was, yeah. I think eventually over time, it starts to become a bigger part of your life, and then you realize that when you're not doing it, you're still thinking about it. So I think yeah, it sort of started to develop over time for me.
I want to go on to your experience in the championship, first with Evergreen and then latterly Muscle Warriors, because I think it's a chapter not many people will know about, especially now because people tend to look at you through the lens of Aspire and England. Going particularly to your journey with Muscle Warriors in the championship, am I right in saying that that was the 1920 season?
Yes.
So that was the one that was disrupted heavily by COVID, and it never went through to its completion, but you still competed across 3 weekends, am I right?
Yeah, I think after the third weekend, that was when COVID
Yeah.
stopped it completely.
Yeah, so with regards to your journey in the championship, for me, that division is one of the best environments to learn and develop in. It's incredibly intense, competitive. It gives players, a lot of players, their first real glimpse of the quality difference between regional league or recreational football and the National League. And it's why I encourage all young players to build their foundations there if they can, because the habits you form, the toughness you develop, the understanding you gain about the tactics and the positions and the rules, to your point, it helps so much. It makes everyone a better player. I was going back looking at that season in particular and looked at some of the names competing at the same time as you. There's, of course, yourself, but Tyler Reeve, Dan Rigby, Ollie Crawshaw, Cole Simpson, Ethan Fisher, John Dixon. The list goes on and on. They were all competing in that same season, in that same division, and all of them now are at the very top of the Premiership or the England programme. So what did playing for Muscle Warriors or Evergreen in the Championship give you as a player?
I think it gave me the first glimpse of structure and of actually the professional side of the game, in terms of all I'd ever experienced before was go and have fun. If you score, it's great, but just try and get to the ball, follow the ball, and maybe you'll get a few touches on it and have a nice time. And I think then when you went to Muscle Warriors, it was, this is what we're going to do in training this week. Let's do this sort of set piece. We want to work on a specific skill. And that made me realise that sort of bridges the gap in my mind between the running game and Powerchair football as we know it, because it was obvious to me that this is obviously clearly what footballers do in their training sessions as well. It's not just they have fun. They clearly are doing these things as well, whether it's working on set pieces, working on their shape out of possession in possession. No matter what it is, I think playing for Muscle Warriors in the Championship was a time where, because obviously I was quite new to the sport, there wasn't too much pressure on me. I didn't have to, no one was expecting me to set the world alight, score every game, be starting every game. So there was no pressure on me, but it was also, I could sort of be an understudy for some of the more experienced players, because there was a lot of experienced players when I came in at the time, and like a group, I think, that's sort of been together for 7 or 8 years before I came in. And yeah, it just gave me a real chance to play really competitive football and structured football and see the sort of tactical side behind it and the competitive side, whilst also not sort of crushing myself with pressure and having to be someone that play at a level where I didn't think I was. So yeah, I think it's a really important step. And like you say, with naming those players, it's I think if you name any sort of young player that's having a rise right now, or any young player in around the senior squad, development squad, any TP, almost every single one of them has been in the Championship at some point. Every single player that's in and around sort of young player of the season awards, player of the season awards, every single, like Tyler Reeve, Dylan Kelsall, Ethan Fisher, all the younger players in the senior squad with me right now, they were obviously all in the Championship at one point. And I think the only real people you can discount is the ones that have been playing since the very start. So you're Ed Common, Chris Gordon, John, Marcus. They obviously probably skipped that step, as far as I know, because the sport there was a lot smaller at that point. There wasn't that sort of clear pathway of you play in the Championship, then the Premiership. I think it was a lot sort of less structured that time. But I think any young player now, I would say, it's like people say academies, and it's like an academy in football. You take the necessary steps, but it's more important to just play as much as possible. So don't go to a Premiership club where you're not going to play at all. I think it's important to maybe take that step down to a Championship club, but then get that game played, because it's not all about the level you're at right now. Sometimes you need to take a step down to then get to the level that you want to get to.
Yeah, it's such important advice. And to your point, I think the only one that hasn't followed that journey is Mitch Tinkler. I think he was fast tracked into Teesside's Premiership side. But beyond that, every player from the kind of the modern era of Powerchair football that have emerged in the last 10 years or so have all got a foundation that's been established in the Championship. Was there a moment when you was competing in the Championship that you started to feel bigger opportunities might be coming, or was you focused on getting better week by week? Because if I went back to March 2020, just before the COVID pandemic kicked in. If I said to you at that point that within the next 2-3 years you'd be competing at the very highest level in the sport, would you have believed me?
I'd love to say I would have and that I sort of backed myself at that time, but I can't say I did. I think it would be a complete lie if I did, because at that time, all I was focused on was, can I see how far we can get up with the league? Can I maybe make my finishing a bit more accurate? Can I learn a bit more about sort of the tactics behind the game and watch a bit more footage when I'm at home? It was those things I was thinking of, not I want to be here in the next few years. And whilst I think setting yourself goals can be really important, I think sort of the most you're going to improve is when you're enjoying it. And so I think when I was at that age, I must have only been, I think it would have been maybe 12 at that point. So I think the most important thing there for me was not putting too much pressure on myself and actually just taking a step back and saying, I'll enjoy it because that's how I'm going to improve sort of organically and naturally. So as much as I wanted to do well and I wanted my team to do well, I was much more focused on sort of the process than the outcome. So I was much more focused on, if I work hard in training, if I enjoy myself in this training session, if I'm watching what the better players in the team are doing and trying to mirror it, that's the way I'm going to improve. And it wasn't necessarily, I'm putting my pressure on myself, so I have to be in the Premiership in 2 years.
Yeah, if you reference that 1920 season, Newcastle ultimately finished top, then it was Leeds Chariots, then it was Teesside, then yourself. Like, so 3 now powerhouses in the Premiership division. So we're talking about it from a player's perspective. The teams as well that are now have gone on to either win the Premiership title or have aspirations to do so this season is pretty remarkable. March 2020, the world stops through COVID. What do you've obviously worked a lot within that lockdown period to ensure that when National League football resumes in the latter stages of the year, you're competing with Aspire. What happens in that 6 to 10 month period for you?
I think it sounds sort of bad to say it, but there was so much boredom, wasn't there, in lockdown? And I think everyone would be able to relate to that. And sort of, it wouldn't have really crossed my mind, I don't think, massively as a thing when I was playing in that 1920 season and when everything was going on, training every week, regionals, nationals. I don't think I really thought too much about, I can actually improve probably the most off the pitch by watching footage and seeing what I could do better. But I think in that period, it clicked to me. I can't really go and train with the team. I can't really get in my chair at the minute. So the only thing I can do to improve is that. I didn't want to feel, I don't think, that I was completely sort of downing tools and giving up and saying, oh, I'll just wait and come back. Because I think there was sort of an opportunity there where if other people were doing that and saying, oh, I can't be bothered, if no one else is training, then I don't have to do anything. I think it sort of gave me a chance to catch up a bit, I guess. So yeah, I think that was sort of the first season of the streaming, if I remember rightly, that 1920 season. And so a bit of it was watching my own games and seeing what I could do better. But I think what I found more helpful than watching my own games and analysing every little micro action that I did was actually watching better teams and seeing what they did. So better players. So I'd watch Aspire's footage. I would watch West Brom's footage. So I'd watch the best teams in the Premiership. And I'd also watch the best teams in the Championship. And I think as much as it can be helpful to watch your own team's footage back as a team and see what went wrong tactically, and also watching what you did back and seeing, oh, is my chair prep a bit poor in this situation? Is my positioning, am I limiting what I can do with that chair angle? As much as that is something that you could do, I think when you're that young, you want to just, it's easier to see what other people are doing. If they're doing that well, just see what they're doing and try and implement it in your own game, I think is the best thing you can do.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Now we get to Aspire. This is where things start to move relatively quickly because Aspire is a club with massive history, massive expectation. They're the most successful and decorated club in English powerchair football. But I think it's important people understand the timing of when you came in, because Aspire, if memory serves, last won the Premiership in 2016, I believe. That was long before you arrived or were even playing Powerchair football for that matter. I think Northern Thunder won it the following season, and then West Brom went on this remarkable run of dominance. And even if you include the shortened COVID season, you're basically looking at 4 or 5 consecutive titles in that spell for them. So Aspire had this identity as a powerhouse of the sport, but they had also had a period where they'd been chasing the Premiership title for years. You arrive as a young player, aged 11 or 12, I think you said, entering into an environment where the standards are so high and the expectation is so great. Most will be aware that Muscle Warriors and Aspire are essentially sister clubs under the same umbrella, but when did Aspire first come onto your radar, and how did that move actually happen?
So, a lot of people sort of talk about these moments where you've got the sliding doors moments, and I think it was another one of those. Like there was a few of them where, like that evergreen one where I got the call on the Friday night, and just quick things that happened that probably completely changed where I am today, and the trajectory of the pace of how things happened. And so, after COVID, we were reintroduced into training. Obviously, I think this may have been around, I can't remember. I think it was maybe around March, April time, whenever the COVID restrictions were lifted slightly, and we were all training in our masks. And yeah, so that's all I can really remember. And Muscle Warriors would train at the same venue as Aspire at the same time in the 2-court venue, so we could always see what each other was doing, and we both do our own sort of practice for whenever the season was going to start, and then we'd implement it obviously in a match at the end. So maybe we'd train for 2 hours on our own and then have a 30-minute match at the end against each other. And I was given the chance to sort of I ended up playing in the middle in quite a few of those matches against Aspire. And it wasn't that I was thinking, oh, I'm going to play in the middle for Muscle Warriors in the future or anything like that. It was more just they wanted me to have the chance to play against. Everyone wants to play against John when they're a young player in the middle. And so I was like, I was chomping at the bit to get that opportunity. And so I played a few of those games against John, and we were just, I think, limiting Aspire to a few chances in those games. And obviously it's training. Not everyone's on their top form in training. Not everyone's treating it like it's a Champions League final. But either way, we were performing well, and I think I was learning quite a lot in that middle role, playing against great players where you're getting the ball passed around you, left, right, and centre. And I think you adapt as well naturally when you play against great players, because maybe for the first couple of weeks after COVID, in those matches, I was getting the ball sipped around me, and I was learning that that's when we're conceding, when they get the ball moving and it's moving around me really quickly, and I'm having to turn, and I'm not sort of disoriented. But then I learn, and I think it's a bit of trial and improvement. And each week we were just sort of doing better, and through that, John sort of noticed me and said, like, what you're doing is really good, just keep it up. And that was all it was at the time. But then came the what was called, it wasn't really the cup final, but you'll remember it, the 2021 FA Disability Cup. So that was the first sort of big event after COVID, and it was treated as more of like an exhibition match than anything, because it wasn't technically the cup final. So I believe the cup final happened at NTU then later in the summer. But this was like a big exhibition match. It was the first one on TV on BT Sport, I believe. And yeah, so Aspire obviously had their main team at the time, and then they had a few players that couldn't make it. So I think Ricken Shaw, who was in the team at the time, I think he couldn't make it, and maybe Bobby Williams as well couldn't make it. So they had 2 players that couldn't make it, and so from a squad of 7, they were down to a squad of 5, essentially, and they didn't want to go on TV when West Brom had the squad of 7 or whatever it was, and they had a squad of 5. So they wanted 1 extra player. And John texted my dad, said, look, I know Dan might be a bit apprehensive about this, but I'm really happy, and I think he's been doing really well against us in training recently. Just in those matches, and been giving us a really good competitive game and a bit of a run for our money. So I'd love him to just come down to St George's Park, which I'd never been to at that point, and stay over for the night before, meet us all, and then come and just have the opportunity and soak in being in the changing room before the game. Obviously, being on the first ever live TV final, and he won't get on, but I can assure you he'll learn a lot, even just from the pressure and the feeling he gets before the game and when the game's on. And that was all it was. So I ended up, probably no one even knows this, but I was on the bench in that game at St George's Park. And obviously, I never got on. I was never expecting to. And I was just there to make up numbers. But in the warm up before the game, it was just like a crazy feeling because everyone had their vuvuzelas and it was really loud. I think everyone was buzzing to have a bit of live Powerchair football back. So even players from different teams had sort of travelled down to watch it as they always do, and like they did with the England USA game in the summer. Whenever there's that live spectacle at St George's, I think people really make an effort because it's not often that we get a big spectator event where it's ticketed, I think, at the minute. So it's happened increasingly more now, but when it happened back then, it was such a rare thing. I think a lot of people travelled down to see it. So playing in front of that crowd was mad. And even if it was just walking out with the team and then playing in the warm up, that was massive for me at the time. And that was my first sort of taste of Aspire. And then in the summer after that, John said, "Do you want to make it a permanent thing? Do you want to come to Aspire for the next season?" Obviously, again, it was, I'm not going to get your hopes up. I can't assure you of any massive game time that you're going to get. But as long as you're sort of committed to learning how to play the proper way, or what he called the proper Aspire way, and as long as you're committed to giving it the best, and I know that you're not going to be upset if you're not playing, and that you're just going to want to learn and improve as much as you can. Do you want to come and join us for the next season?
That really is a sliding doors moment or a series of events, isn't it? I'm ashamed of myself because I completely forgot that you featured as part of the Aspire squad for that final in question. I remember 2 days before it taking place, I got COVID, and it was the one that was very heavily restricted and monitored, and it meant that I couldn't attend. And I was so upset that I didn't even watch it on BT Sport. I was that angry. But no, it's amazing that you was part of that experience, and we'll go on to talk about that showcase, St George's Park, what it means to compete in a televised final, because to your point, there is nothing like it. It is truly unique and unbelievably special. But you've made the move over to Aspire in the summer of 2022. What stood out to you like the most when you first entered that environment? Was there, and you've all but answered it, but was there a noticeable shift in speed, decision making, maybe the tactical detail, the physicality? Because in comparison to Muscle Warriors, these are two teams with very different aspirations.
I think the thing that stood out for me the most was doing the rondo in my first couple of sessions and not being able to get out of the middle. People were just, the passing was rapid, it was accurate. People could sort of send you, they could trick you, to make you think they're going one way and then pass the other. So it was very different to what I was used to. And I think it definitely took a little while to sort of adapt to that, because I think that's inevitable when you're going up a level in any sport. I think you're going to take a few times to get up to the pace of it. But it was also, I think, the attitudes that stood out to me as well. It wasn't the attitude of, let's do what we can and let's see how it takes us. It was, our goal is we win this league and we win this cup. And it was like, it wasn't, oh, let's win a game and then it doesn't matter if we don't win the next one. Let's just celebrate this win all weekend. it was we win this game and then we get on to the next one. We focus on the next game. There wasn't much sort of hanging around. And that really, like I spoke about before, when you first sort of realised the professionalism of the sport that aligns with the running game, that was another moment where it was really, we've got a goal, we're going to stick to it, and we're going to be as professional as we can when we go about it. So I think, yeah, that was probably the biggest noticeable thing going to Aspire, the paces of play and the complete sort of shift in mentality away from we'll do what we can to we'll do what we have to do at all costs.
And with that in mind, was there ever any part of you that felt overwhelmed or that you'd made the wrong decision making that leap up to that level at the age, or was this kind of exactly where you wanted to be at that time?
I think there was a bit of worry probably before I started, like, oh, have I made the wrong decision leaving muscles? Like, do I need another couple of years? So I think before I had my first session and between the cup final and training sort of coming back after a bit of a summer break, maybe I was a bit worried, but I think it was one of them, like you said about earlier in the episode, sort of finding where you feel at home. I knew that I wanted to be a footballer when I was a kid, and I wasn't able to be a footballer in the way that I thought I'd be a footballer. But when I started training with Aspire and we were doing a rondo and it was finishing drills, set pieces, we were doing everything that I would expect from a big like a running game club, and sort of just the mentality and the standards that everyone was holding themselves to. That was sort of, I knew I'd made the right decision, and I knew that there's no way that I'd come out of this, even just this national weekend this season. I knew there was no way that I wouldn't improve playing with the group of people I was playing with, and especially learning from John.
Talk to me briefly about that first season with Aspire, because whilst it ultimately went the way of West Bromwich Albion, you did incredibly well to establish yourself within the squad, finishing as Aspire's top goal scorer with, I think, 14 goals across the 22 league game season, which is not bad at all when you consider some of the firepower they had in John, Rosie, and others.
Yeah, I think I definitely found my form towards the end of that season. I think you get used to everything over time, and it was tricky at the start because there'd be times where John would expect me to be somewhere, he'd flick the ball there, I wasn't there. That's natural. Like, there's always going to be miscommunications when you're not necessarily used to it. Whereas the other players had been playing with that specific sort of setup and positioning and tactical sort of ideology for ages. So they just sort of subconsciously knew where to be. And I'd say I'm like that now, where I don't even really have to think necessarily when I'm playing for Aspire, because we all know, like me and John Dixon, kind of know where each other's going to be now. So it's you don't have that struggle as much. But at the time, I definitely had that. And but yeah, as the season went on, near the latter stage of the season, I definitely started to feel a lot more comfortable playing for Aspire, and it started to feel like maybe I'm not out of my depth at this level. Maybe I actually can, with the help of obviously John playing alongside me and Rosie, Jordan, Bobby. They were all great on the other wing. That sort of, I felt like maybe I could. Maybe if I wasn't going to be a world beater in the next year or 2 years, but I could definitely be a Premiership player. And yeah, obviously 14 goals. I think I was absolutely made up with that tally. I didn't think I was going to get even 5. So again, that was amazing. And I think then having that sort of, oh my God, I've actually done well here, probably just gave me the motivation to go again. Because as soon as you get that good feeling once of I've achieved something here, it actually, you can use that as your reference point whenever things get hard in the future. Then if you have a game the next season, oh, I've played really bad, but then I've let my team down, we've drawn, we've lost in a game we were expected to win. You can go back and say, even though I don't have the feeling right now, remembering that feeling of when something's gone really well for you is actually quite helpful to stabilize yourself, regulate yourself, and then be ready to sort of push forward, even if it is difficult at that time.
You say you came into your own towards the end of the season, but I recall you scoring an equaliser late on against West Brom in game week 1 of that season. And for me, I think that was you announcing yourself on the Premiership stage and showing people what potential you had. And I think it's fair to say joining Aspire is one thing, establishing yourself as a key component of that squad is something else entirely. So we'll go to 22-23 because that marked your second season with Aspire. And from my perspective, I'm sure you will have your own thoughts and feelings. But I believe that was your most significant year in your career. It was an incredibly competitive season, firstly, that ended with Aspire ending that trophy drought, lifting the Premiership title, the 8th in its history. It was the final day. You played West Brom. Aspire were on 58 points at the time. West Brom, I believe, were on 55 points, but with a far superior goal difference. So the margins were so tight. You needed a win or a draw to ensure that you lifted the trophy. You score the winner in a 1-0 win that takes Aspire to the title. And in doing so, I think you also confirmed your spot in the EFA Champions Cup the following year in Paris, which is not bad for your second season. Then 5 days later, there's obviously so many other stuff going on around the National League success. But 5 days following that, the England World Cup squad for Sydney is confirmed, which we'll talk about properly. And I'm not saying that one game, that one moment defined everything that's followed since, but that whole period in early 2023 felt so significant, not because you'd earned the trust of John Balding and your teammates at Aspire, but you'd also shown Colin Gordon and Adam Crowell and the wider England coaching group that you had the mentality to handle the pressure and step into an England shirt at a major competition. We obviously, of course, had the WFA Cup between that as well. When you look back now, how does that season, winning the league and the Cup with Aspire, then almost immediately being named in the World Cup squad, rank for you personally?
I think, yeah. I think if we're talking about sort of the most influential seasons in my career as a whole, that's got to be number one. It sort of came out of nowhere. I was happy that I had a good season in my first year at Aspire, and I was only focused on you just focused on your team, I think, or that's what I was trying to do anyway. So let's try and win the league and the cup, which we were able to do, which was fantastic. But I wasn't saying to myself at that point, let's go and try and get in the World Cup squad, because I think I wasn't even technically at the start of that season. I don't think I was even on the NETP yet. I think there was a trial around October, September time that year for the NETP that I went to, but I wasn't even officially on the NETP yet. So when they were sort of 3 steps behind the senior squad, it's not the last thing on your mind. It's at that point I was thinking, maybe can I get to the NETP by the end of the season, the development squad. I wasn't thinking, can I go to the World Cup? So yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere. And I think it was just one of those where, as long as you focus on doing the best for yourself and doing the best for your team, amazing things can happen. But I can't say that that was my goal at the start of the season, to get to the World Cup squad. It was amazing that it happened, but I think that was well beyond what I would have dreamed of. And my first sort of ambition was just to try and, I wasn't even wanting to go beyond. I just wanted to sort of replicate. So I was so happy with what I'd done in my first year at Aspire. I just wanted to replicate that, to be honest. And so going beyond that and then winning the league was amazing. And then everything that came with it was it was a bit of a whirlwind that year. It happened so fast, going from sort of nobody the year before to suddenly being even in and around the development squad and NETP, and then eventually the senior squad, was absolutely crazy for me. And that was the year where I think I maybe started to believe in myself a bit more. It went from less of a I get to go and play football with my friends at the weekend now too. So I want to be a professional. I see this as a proper career that I want to invest in and sort of look back on when I'm old and say I had a great football career.
What do you remember most about that final game against West Brom and ultimately regaining the title for Aspire?
It's a funny one. I actually just remember looking at the clock and I think it was about 5 or 10 minutes left. And I was just thinking, let's not lose this. Let's not lose this. Let's take it to the corner when we have to. Give John the ball and let him do whatever he wants to do because I'm sure he'll know what to do. And it was such an unnatural position for me because obviously the rest of the team, Tom was in goal. I don't think he'd won the league before, but I think Brad was on one wing and John was obviously in the middle. And so they'd both won the league before and they were probably a bit more comfortable with it than I was. But for me, I'd never been in a situation like that before. Not even in the championship, I'd never been close to winning the league. So it was one of them where I didn't necessarily have the experience, but being around people and a club that does have the experience of doing that probably helped. So they were just sort of saying, let's lock it up, make sure we win the game. And obviously you're still switched on because you've got to try and be scoring. That's the aim of the game. But I don't think it was on my mind to sort of be thinking, let me lurk in around the back post and score a goal. I was just thinking we need a draw and that should be enough as long as we beat Brighton in the afternoon. So I was thinking, let's just not do anything stupid. Don't give away a goal. Make sure you're switched on and alert and see the game out. So for a goal to then come was very unexpected, but it was very nice to win it in that game because then nobody was on tenterhooks. Everyone was relaxed for the match in the afternoon. We were able to have a more rotated team in the afternoon. Everyone was happy, and there was just that first of all there was that breath of relief, and we were able to celebrate it in the evening, and then sort of have a bit of a, I guess, parade game in the afternoon, which is always nice. I think Liverpool did it in the Premier League in the running game last year, where they'd won the league with a few games to spare, and then you're in party mode, and that was a bit what it was like. We could just enjoy playing with each other and look back on what we'd sort of done in the season and enjoy it. Whereas if we went into that game knowing we had to win, maybe after we scored, if we got the goal early on, it would have been able to relax, but you can't guarantee anything. So there's that aspect to it, but there was also that thing of beating West Brom to do it was incredible because everyone knew at that time it was Aspire and West Brom. Those were the two teams. That was it. Because Northern Thunder, I think that was the year where they'd always been in it up until that point. Then they were struggling for players. I think that was their last year. So they were struggling for players in the last couple of weekends, which definitely impacted them. They still had great players. You had Ed Coleman, Jack Maxwell, but it wasn't. I think they struggled with goalkeepers a lot through that season, is what I can remember, and they were just struggling for that third and fourth player. So they sort of fell away from the title race. So it was just us and West Brom. So to go in that weekend knowing they're your number one competitor and then win it against them and players that are European champions that was incredible.
Yeah, from my memory, I think I was commentating on that final game against West Brom, and you'd done so well to nullify them all game, and then they just committed players forward towards the latter stages, and you was there to capitalise and take it out of West Brom's hands. But no, it's a fantastic memory, and my God, it's been some journey since for you personally. I want to talk about John Balding for a bit because his influence on your journey and the sport more broadly for that matter is so hard to ignore. He's been around the top level for a very long time, and I think most people will agree he's one of kind of the reference points in Powerchair football now, both in how he plays the game, how he carries himself, how he represents us. And for a young player coming into that environment, like Aspire, like England, being around someone like that, without question, has an impact. You're not just picking up on the cues technically or tactically, you're learning how to manage pressure, as we've just discussed, how to become a dependable teammate member, how to become a role model. And from the outside, it's clear that John trusted you early on, backed you in the big moments. And while that's true, knowing you both as I do, I know it hasn't always been straightforward. There are times where he'll put an arm around you, give you confidence. And there are other times where he'll be more direct and demanding because he knows when you need that. And sometimes it's encouragement, sometimes it's a firmer word. And I think that balance has played a big part in how you've developed. How would you describe John's influence both on you as a teammate and someone you look up to in the sport?
I think when you talk about John, he's just a born leader. Obviously, he's an unbelievable player, probably the best to ever come out of England, but that's not really the most important thing sometimes. I think he's just absolutely a leader through and through. And I've always seen that. As soon as I came through into Aspire, it was always just, if I'd had a good session, he was grounding me, telling me, don't get too ahead of yourself, telling me, don't let your head get too big, everything like that. And if I'd had a bad session, he also knew, like you said, when to put his arm around me. And he was just a rock and a point of reference always. And I think also when I did make the transition into the England squad, it was so nice to have him there as well, because I felt so comfortable with him. Obviously, I'm 14 and I'm going in trying to play alongside people like Ed, Marcus, and they're winners that I'd watched for years before that. 2 or 3 years. I'd watched them at the previous Euros when I was in the Championship, and to then sort of try and rub shoulders with them, it was so nice to have John there as sort of to bridge the gap, and he was just so good at welcoming me into the squad. And I think because everyone knew that, I guess, me and John had a good relationship, it made it easier for me to then connect with everyone else. And so, yeah, there's that side of him just being a complete leader. And then there's also the thing where I think, as we spoke about, technically he's helped me so much, because as much as he does have a go at me, and I have had people in the past saying, oh, that John, he does wave his arms around and shout at you a lot, doesn't he, when you're playing? And they were like, do you like that? Is he not just having a massive go at you? I've always said he's not, because as much as he maybe is shouting at me and saying, oh, why did you do that? Why did you do that? It was only ever to improve me, I think. And that was the way I saw it. And I think maybe there's people that might not have that mentality about it and might maybe just feel a bit more sensitive to that kind of thing. And I can understand that. If there's other young players probably that wouldn't have wanted that approach, but because I knew and I'd seen in training and just in general life how much of a good leader and sort of role model he was, I didn't take it as he's trying to wear me down and upset me. I fully just took it as he wants me to be as good as I possibly can. And obviously, I could see it. I think the big thing also is I could see it was starting to help, even if it was just small things. I could see like my consistency of ball contact getting better, and I was starting to read probably his cues a bit better, and even just read the game in general. So yes, he's sometimes harsh on me, but I think it was a funny video I actually saw around the time of when I was first in Aspire. It was Pep Guardiola and Joshua Kimmich back in the Bayern Munich days, and Pep Guardiola is shouting at Joshua Kimmich right in his face. But then you look at Kimmich, he's become probably one of the best holding midfielders in the world, and Pep Guardiola is regarded by many as the best coach of all time. So it was one of them where some people might not like that approach and might want to take a more gentle and supportive approach, but that really worked for me because I could see it was paying off and I knew that it was coming from a genuine good place. So yeah, John has really had a massive effect on me, and we always argue, we always have a bit of a joke. He says, oh, I'd been nothing without him. And I say, no, there's a little bit of hard work that went into it, but no, I do honestly have to owe most of my success to him. And even though people do say, oh, you and John are all lovey-dovey and You just love John, don't you? But I do have to. I have to owe everything to John. And yeah, if he hadn't taken a chance on me back with Aspire, I probably wouldn't. Or I definitely wouldn't be anywhere near sort of playing in the big Premiership games or the England games like I have been able to.
Yeah, it's a remarkable journey. It's a remarkable relationship, and that's why I wanted to say it, because I know you both so well. I've spent so much time with you. Um, I would characterize it as, for me, it feels like John is your biggest fan and your harshest critic, and I mean that in the best way. I mean constructive criticism, because he's desperate to make you a better player, help you become a better person as you grow up and you navigate education and soon the world of work. But that's how I've always seen it. Biggest fan, harshest critic.
Yeah, I think that's probably a completely fair and accurate way to describe it. He's always absolutely advocating for me. It's one of them where they say it about your family as well, and like a brother or a sibling. At home, they're your biggest enemy, and you bicker and you argue and you have a go at each other. But then if anyone else, for example, John's allowed to have a massive go at me. If he ever heard anyone else having a go about me or just criticizing me, I'm sure he'd be the first one to back me up. So yeah, he's my biggest fan in that sense. And then also he sometimes does criticize me, but it's all in good nature.
Absolutely, it is. Just staying with club football for a moment, what stands out, as we alluded to at the start of the episode, when referencing your journey, is the sheer range of competitions you've already experienced. You've competed in pretty much every possible competition the sport can offer: domestic leagues in England, regional competitions, continental tournaments, and now a global club competition as well with the Club World Cup back in June of last year. And each of those stages has given you something slightly different. I think the National League demands consistency over a 10-month period. Regional leagues expose you to different rhythm and styles, and that you're probably experimented in a range of different positions and tactical roles because the schedule and the quality is less demanding. The WFA Cup brings one game pressure, knockout format. European test your tactical awareness. Club World Cup throws you into a completely different and new environment where there's different interpretations of the game, different rules, different cultures. How important has the variety of competitions been in helping you understand different roles and different expectations?
I think massively important. And the biggest things probably draw on for me is the difference between regional league and national league, because national league there's the risk in terms of I would always play out on the wing back in the day in national league because John had to be on all the time because we needed to win every game, and it was, if we don't win the game, that could be really detrimental for our whole season. Whereas regional league, especially when you're a younger player, is that time where there's no risk. And as much as you maybe want to win the regional league, it's not, you have slightly easier games sometimes, and also games which don't matter as much. So that was when I got my chance to experiment in different roles. I can remember being in goal in some games, in the middle, and the wing. And I think you learn about how other people need you to play once you play in different positions. So maybe playing in the middle, I learn how John would want the ball played to him. So I know the angle now that he would need it if he wants to switch to the far side, or the pace that he needs it if he wants to reverse spin it, something like that. And I think then you look at the international competitions, the European competitions, and that I think maybe teaches you how to deal with pressure more so than the national league and the regional league and the so yeah, I think the WFA Cup and then those international competitions where there's the bigger viewership, there's more people there, there's more noise. That's really about dealing with the pressure. And do you have those coping mechanisms that when it's loud, when it's maybe intimidating, you're playing against Momo, Brian, Zegarelli, Vardy Johnson, the best players in the world? Have you had enough exposure to pressure in your own country that then when you go abroad and you're playing these big competitions against these amazing international players, are you able to sort of stand up to the challenge? And so I think everything offers a different challenge. And this might sound absolutely bonkers, but the thing that I find the hardest is actually National League. And you might think like playing in a World Cup or playing in a Club World Cup or Champions League would be harder. But honestly, National League is the most difficult. Maybe it wasn't when I first started with sort of just it being Aspire West Brom. But now, like I've heard it referenced on many podcasts in the past, the WFA ones, um, where there's so many good teams, it makes it the hardest thing by a mile because whether you've got a 2-game day or a 3-game day, you, you don't really get many easy games anymore. So, like even our last weekend, games where we're playing against teams that are 8th, 10th in the table, I think was where, or I don't know exactly where they were, but definitely at least Middlesbrough and Villa Rockets weren't, I don't think they were massively high up the table after the first weekend, which obviously was a bit of a false table because it had only been a few games. But you, you're playing against teams who are supposed to be easier wins because they're lower down the table, but they're not. And you've got to be on your top form every single time. Because, like, you go into you look at your weekend, you've got Newcastle, Villa, you've got really tough games. And then, like, next time, I think we've got Middlesbrough. We played Middlesbrough the first weekend as well. And they're always a team that I find really difficult, Middlesbrough. I think they're set up really well. I think Umar and James Found are really good as a defensive pairing. And then Carl Forster, Cath, Ethan Galloway, Tom Pettigrew, like they've got wingers that know what they're doing. And I'd say they're all wingers that probably watch a lot of the sport and are fairly knowledgeable and have obviously been exposed to European competition as well, a lot of them. So they're always a team that I find different. I always use them as a reference point because you don't expect to see them flying up the table and in a title race or even really in the top half. But they're always difficult to play against. So you never really get that chance to breathe because you should when you're saying, oh, it's a 12-team league and we're playing against 10th next. So maybe we don't have to be on top form and maybe we can slack a little bit and we'll still be okay. Or if we don't make the best ball contact, we'll be all right. But you're not. If you slip up in this league and you're not on at least 80% of your game every single time, you really are going to struggle. So I think that's what makes it difficult. When it's just a 5-6 game tournament, like a European tournament, it can sometimes be easier because replicating performances over a 3-game day where you're playing against teams that are so hard to break down can be such a big challenge.
No, I completely agree with your assessment. I would compare it to the running game and say that the Premier League is far harder to win, to attain, than that of the Champions League or other European or club-based international competitions, because it does demand that consistency over an 8-10 month period, and that's incredibly hard to achieve. And to your point, one slip up, one bad game, one bad weekend, and the whole season could have detrimental impacts. And I would say with confidence that the conclusion of the 25-26 season, the season we're currently in, will probably be decided by 3 points at maximum, knowing how tight it is, knowing how competitive it is. That's slip up in one game, and that makes a huge difference. When you're referencing all of those competitions, is there one in particular that you feel brings out the best in you, where you feel the most comfortable, or do you enjoy the challenge switching between them? Do you like the proving it across a long period, or do you like it in a short, sharp burst?
I think definitely proving it over a long period because I think it gives you the chance to, it's not too detrimental. Let's say you have one game where maybe you don't perform to the level you normally think you can do. You then, or even if you have a poor weekend, like there is a chance to bounce back and you then have a good weekend the next time and the next time after, and suddenly you're back in it again. Whereas with cup competitions, like for example, talking about the Euros, if we didn't hit our 11 in that first day, on the second day or the third day, it's literally you're playing every single day and you don't get a chance to regroup and then come back and improve your performances after that. It's with those cup formats and there's tournament formats, it can be so hard. Whereas, yeah, like as you say, when you've got that longer stretch of time where consistency is valued over short, sharp bursts of quality, it can be a lot easier. And I think generally, like you say, it can be harder to win the Premier League than a Champions League or a cup, for example, because you do have to be the best team over a really long period, and it's more of a marathon rather than a sprint.
Let's talk about one of those short, sharp bursts of quality, or sprint as you put it, and unpack the EPFA Champions Cup. Now, I don't think it's unfair to say that going into that Champions Cup, Aspire weren't arriving with much momentum from the domestic season. West Brom had regained both the Premiership and would go on to also lift the WFA Cup. So realistically, Paris felt like the last and probably the most unlikely opportunity to lift silverware based on all of those factors. And early on, within the competition, nothing suggested that would necessarily change. You didn't have it all your own way in the group stage. And I think for most, there were at least 3 teams in that competition in West Bromwich Albion, Upsilon Châtenay Malabry, and Grafto Villeneuve d'Ascq, who most people would have tipped to finish above Aspire. And that became really apparent on the penultimate day, whereby Aspire suffered a 1-0 defeat to West Brom, followed by what I still, which I think, I'm sure someone will correct me, is the heaviest defeat in Aspire's modern history, losing 7-1 to Upsilon. I want to know from your perspective, just focusing on that day and that evening, how did it feel within the group? Was there a change in belief? Suffering consecutive defeats, did you feel that your hopes of lifting the Champions League equivalent for our sport had slipped away? Or was there still a little bit of belief that you could turn it around?
Obviously, going off logic, you look at it and you say, if you got beaten 7-1 by a team one day, you're not going to be able to beat them the next day. But we actually went into that Upsilon game with no real... We said, for the West Brom, the Upsilon game, we're going to go and we're not going to plan too much ahead of those games. But we don't want to give away our full hand. We're just going to see what we can do in those games. And 7-1 is an awful result. And a result you would never normally expect from Aspire. But it was one of them where we've gone in, we've performed okay in the first half. I think we're 2-1 down or 3-1 down at half time. Then we said in the second half, all right, they're gonna go for it now. Momo's gonna stay on. So I think I ended up dropping into the middle, and we just completely rotated the team, and we got absolutely battered in the second half. But we never got our heads down because we believed that our planning was gonna pull through. And so then we got back to the changing room after the game, and you'd expect it to be absolutely, we'd all be demoralised and we'd all be absolutely gutted. But it wasn't. We were all sort of, a lot of us were smiling. And that might sound crazy, but we actually had a lot of belief. We do a bit of prep tonight and we'll beat them tomorrow. And we knew that we'd probably be, if we did get through to the final, we knew it'd be probably them more likely than Villeneuve, just due to Momo's sheer quality that we would play in the final. And so the team went away. There was a lot of work done before the next day. And then it was West Brom the next morning. And there wasn't, to be fair, there wasn't a massive amount of prep that needed to be done for that one because we'd played against West Brom so many times that year already in the group stage of that tournament and in the league. Obviously, the league season was already finished, so we'd played them twice. And people could say maybe we got a bit of a stroke of luck with Marcus failing his speed test in that first half, which then...
Did Valentino Zegarelli got sent off in that one as well, didn't
Yeah,
he?
so Marcus failed his speed test in the first half, which I think then Valentino and Gilly started on the wings. And then I think around 15 minutes maybe in the game. It's a little while ago, so I can't remember fully, but I think around the 15-minute mark, Valentino got sent off. Because I think, he full spun into John. And from that point onwards, you would sort of back yourself to go on and win that game. And it was really difficult because Marcus, in any game, we'd had one earlier that season as well, where Marcus, they drew 2-2 with us and made the comeback with 3 men because Marcus is just unbelievable in that format of football where he ends up making up for the lost player because he can sort of do it all on his own in those kind of games where it's not, you can't do it all on your own when you're trying to play a passing style. But with how good he is at dribbling, he made up for the wing that wasn't on the far side. And so I think it ended up being 2-2 after extra time in that game. And yeah, so it was 2-2 at full time. I think all the goals came in the second half. So it was quite an interesting second half. West Brom scored the last kick of the game. And then nothing really happened in extra time. It was nobody wanted to give it away, which I think is quite understandable. Champions League semi-final. And it went to penalties, which was worrying for us because then it became a level playing field. The 3 players of West Brom doesn't really play a part in it when it is just penalties and that meant that one person obviously couldn't take penalties from our team. So John put on the goalkeeper shirt and me, John and Brad stepped up penalties for us. And it was the moving keeper rule at that point. So obviously everyone knew it was going to be really difficult to score penalties after the World Cup final that year. And just in general, everyone knows how hard it is, especially more so for PF1s, to score from those penalties. So yeah, John scored his penalty, then Chris scored his, and I was able to score the winning penalty in that semi-final, which was a really proud moment. I can't say I was expecting it because as much as we'd practiced a bit in training, none of us could score. And obviously it was against John, but even in the semi-final it was against Chris, so they're both top-class keepers. It is just so hard to score from those penalties with the moving keeper. So yeah, nobody could score in training, so we didn't really go into that penalty shootout knowing what was going to happen. But yeah, we were lucky to be able to edge them out, and then we did a lot of work. We had quite a big gap between that and the final, and we did a lot of video work, and we were able to form what we thought was maybe a much better plan than we had the day before to edge out Upsilon.
Yeah, I mean, on the semi-final, a bit of grit, maybe a bit of luck, but you're in the final against the same Upsilon side that had beaten you 7-1 less than 24 hours before. What follows is one of the most remarkable responses in the sport's history. I don't think it's unfair to say. You stayed composed, disciplined, and I rewatched it today. Just before halftime, John, on the edge of his own box, picks you out, advancing down the left. You produce the most sensational 180 splitting diagonal pass to locate Brad Bates on the alternate wing, who just finished beautifully, a goal that proved decisive. And that meant you lift the EPFA Champions Cup, becoming the first English club to do so. You said that you had a lot of time between the semi-final and the final. You don't have to give too much away, but how do you instill a mentality that allows you to completely forget the 7-1 defeat and go in with the belief that you can beat this team? And at that point in that fixture, Upsilon were already confirmed for the semi-final. They had nothing really to play for, yet they still produced such a dominant performance. And we know how good France are on the international stage and how they just come into their own in finals. It's so remarkable to me that you were able to instill a mentality that bettered that.
Yeah, I think I'm still sort of shocked by it. I can't really speak for the rest of the team, but for me, it was trying to be really relaxed. And I always try and do that on the day of the game. I try and just be as normal and relaxed as possible. So I went home. I went back to the hotel. I watched the Oxford semi-final, and then I remember going back to the hotel, and I just laid on my bed for an hour or two, just relaxing, sort of seeing what was going on back home. I think I even looked a bit of their schoolwork on my phone, which might sound mad, but I was really just trying to take my mind off the game ahead, because I think when you overthink it and you think about all the possible scenarios, sometimes people say visualization's helpful to think about it going well, but sometimes I think you can be at risk of, especially after what happened the day before, thinking about all the possible bad things that could happen. So I tried to stay really calm, just literally relaxed in the hotel room, got a bit of food 2 or 3 hours before the game, went back over to the sports hall, and obviously met up with the team, went to change a room, did a bit of video footage with them, and yeah, it was just, we were all so calm, and there was just a sense that we could, I think we all just had, the words were never spoken, but I think we all felt like we could do it. And we were all just so relaxed. And I think the big thing for us was that we knew the pressure was on them. When a team's beating you 7-1 the day before, the pressure's clearly on them to do it the next day. So maybe that played a part, the expectancy on their shoulders that they had to do it. And everyone sort of given up on the fact that we could possibly do it. So we were definitely the underdogs, and I don't know if anyone watched Macclesfield Crystal Palace on Saturday, but it's one of them where Macclesfield have got no pressure on them, and Palace are the holders. So as much as you would say it could never possibly happen, and Crystal Palace should have beaten them 5 or 6-0, it doesn't always happen that way. And so that was the mentality that we adopted. There's no pressure on us. All the pressure's on them. Let's just go out, stick to our game plan, and we thought we'd have a good chance.
I mean, did that mentality shift at all? I mean, Brad scored just before the halftime break. I'd love to understand what that halftime team talk was like. Was it, let's continue doing what we're doing, keeping Upsilon at bay? Or was there still the going into the unknown, that you just take it bit by bit?
I think then, I don't think after the goal anything changed, but I think when we got into halftime, it was everyone dig in now. We dropped John back a bit, and we made more than a V, where John's sort of defending both the wingers. We changed into a bit of a Y, where me and Brad came really narrow, and so it basically gave us 3 lines rather than 2 defensively. And so me and Brad came really narrow defensively, and we tried to just shut off the game as much as we can. And it's impossible to shut Momo off completely. We tried to limit the space he had for flicks around the edge of the box, which is what he's really prominent with. And we tried to, just limit their opportunities to get the ball moving. And we definitely got a slice of luck. I remember them hitting the post from pretty much an open goal about halfway through that half. And at that point, I think that was when it felt maybe the stars have aligned a bit here and we have to go and do it now. So yeah, it was just get on the ball as much as we can, and when we do, get it to areas where they can't hurt us.
No, a remarkable, historic achievement that I'm sure you will remember for the rest of your lives. It was magical. I was devastated. I wasn't there, but I'm glad that your brother Charlie was there commentating and calling all of the action, and it meant the people that were watching from here in England felt incredibly connected with it. So that was the summer of 2024. And then almost a year on exactly, you are traveling to Paris once again for the inaugural FIFA Powerchair Football Club World Cup, a competition that had some familiar opponents, some completely new ones, and a very different kind of challenge. For the first time that clubs from varied continents had come together, as we've already spoken about, different footballing cultures, different interpretations, almost the complete unknown for Powerchair football. And again, very similar to the Champions Cup, you arrive off the back of another domestic season where you haven't lifted the league title. So there's expectation, but there's also a sense of wanting to show what you're capable of off the back of that disappointment. Results-wise, it didn't fall the way Aspire would have wanted. there were several factors that disrupted momentum, and it would be easy to get caught up in what might have been. Um, but what really stood out to me, and many others for that matter, is how you handled that environment as an individual. And I'm talking about you personally, especially when responsibility landed on your shoulders. And I'm talking particularly about John's suspension for the game against Tigres de Pacheco, which suddenly thrusted you into this leadership role for the remainder of that game, and the following fixture against Grato Villeneuve d'Ascq, one of the strongest club sides in the world. And in that match, you didn't just raise your levels, you completely controlled the game. You dictated the tempo, you influenced the game from start to finish, you nullified Brian Weiss, one of the greatest players to ever play the sport. And for me, that performance showed the full potential of your game coming to fruition. You're already recognized as one of the best wide players in the sport, but that match showed you could step in centrally and still control that rhythm, fill that John Bolden void, and run a game at the highest level. Give me your experience from that game, and then go on to talk about the competition as a whole.
I can't lie. I've said I was really relaxed before the Champions League final, but I was really nervous before that game. I'd played in the middle at National League and the Regional League, and even in the Cup, but playing in the middle against one of the best middle players ever is absolutely daunting, I think, for anyone, let alone someone whose natural position probably isn't even really in the middle. So I was nervous. I tried to manage it. We've had a psychologist at England when I was at the World Cup, and I've generally just tried to read up a bit and learn as much as I can about managing nerves and managing pressure. And I think as you are tasked with doing it more and playing in more important competitions, you sort of try and get a bit better at it. But inevitably, there was a lot of nerves there. And although there wasn't, like, again with the Oxfam game, there probably wasn't much pressure. There maybe would have been if John was there. It would have been a really big game in the group stage. But without John there, I think a lot of people maybe wrote us off and said, well, if John's not there, Aspire are nothing without John. So it's going to be a walkover. We don't even need to bother watching the game. But we always knew that everyone knows their role so well. And so John Dixon sort of had to step into my role as the more defensive, digging in winger. And I obviously had to step into John's role. And Rosie played as like our outlet ball. And it's sort of just, we obviously didn't have much time because John's suspension happened in the morning. It wasn't obviously a planned thing. So we didn't have much time we never trained as, we've played at regionals and a bit at nationals as that for, but we didn't really spend a lot of time in training because obviously no one could forecast it. No one would expect a red card to happen. So it was a bit of out of nowhere, but I knew that as I've said a bit before, I do watch a lot of the sport. That I owe a lot of my, I think, sort of journey over the past few years to that. And I think I remember reading something that Dylan had written maybe a year or two ago, and he had said the same thing about how watching, dedicating all his spare time to video had really helped him. And I think I'd recommend it to anyone because having watched a bit of video of Brian, I sort of knew what he wanted to do. I knew that he wanted to get the ball on his back wheel. He had a great, powerful flick on him, as a lot of the French players do. And I think I sort of just knew a few of his tricks, which maybe people wouldn't look out for naturally. And yeah, so we went into it with the mentality that not to focus on damage limitation, but not to get our heads down and to just, no matter if it's 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 4-0, every time we come back to kick off to reset and keep fighting. But obviously it was literally the first action of the game. We had a massive chance, and then just after that we scored. So that completely sort of changed and set the precedent for the game where it went from being a game where we should just try and do our best not to lose too heavily to a game where if we hold on to this, we've got a real chance of going through into the semis. So yeah, we defended as well as we could in that game. We had to defend loads of corners. We had to defend a lot of their open play, and it was tricky. We did, I think, all we could, and unfortunately, we made it to half time. The water breaks were really helpful. We obviously had a bit of a chance to reset our focus and then go again in the next 10 minutes, and sort of breaking up the half for us was really helpful. But around, I think, just after the 30th minute mark, after the water break, we conceded, which was really unfortunate. Because obviously it would have changed the group stage sort of standings completely had we won that game. But I don't think we saw it as we've bottled it, we've made a massive mistake there. It was more of we're really proud of what we've done in that game. I don't think anyone gave us a chance of even keeping it within 5 goals. So getting a draw was a big thing, and I think it's sort of given us the confidence now going forward, like for this season and going forward, that we can also do it without John. We're the best team when we're with John. Like, I'm not saying we're the best team in the country, but as in, we're obviously better when we're with John. But we've shown that we can do it without him as well, which hopefully will change other people's perception. And also, I think John likes it because he now gets that feeling that he doesn't have the pressure all on his shoulders at once. He can have an off day and it's not the end of the world, or he can come off and rest and give other people a chance. And there's still people there that can fill his role whilst he's off and see the games out. So it was definitely quite an interesting game, and maybe a bit transformative for like the way people see Aspire, hopefully. But yeah, I think we definitely took a lot from it, and as much as we didn't get the exact result we wanted, I think we can still be quite proud of it, especially given the circumstances and the fact that we thought we should have had a second goal in that game as well, which absolutely killed us, I think. So you can't blame that completely, because obviously we then conceded the goal afterwards, but we did feel hard done by with the decision not to play advantage for that goal.
Yeah, there is injustices attached to that game. Anyone that watched it will know that you completely outplayed and nullified the whole team. And beyond that, taking this particular fixture out of consideration, I had Grafto Villeneuve-d'Ascq as the best team of the competition. I think they should have won the final on the Friday evening. They were that good. And you completely thwarted them, and you were playing them at a stage where they had their full strength side as well, because I know they Florian Lechantre got reclassified shortly after your fixture, and that meant that they had to alter and change things significantly. So you were playing the best version of them, and you should have gone 2-0 up. You should have got the 3 points, and then we're saying what could have been. But very similar to yourself, I view it as that was almost like a coming of age performance. That was a catalyst. That was a springboard that you've now built so much of your success on. And we'll go on to talk about the WFA Cup final, which followed very shortly after. But I think a lot of that togetherness stemmed from that particular fixture and that series of events, from John's red card to your player of the match performance. And everything beyond that, because you were fairly faultless beyond that. Just more overarching on that competition, at international level, you faced the likes of Valentino Zegarelli, Marco Diaz, Francisco Wilde, but at club level, how different did the game feel against clubs from other continents compared to European opposition?
I think it was completely different in that when you sort of go away and you work in your own continent, you learn off the other countries that are also sort of nearby to you. Then you don't realize that there's some countries doing things completely differently. Like, I think the thing that really emphasized that the most, anyone that watched the game will know what I'm talking about, was the Tigres set piece routines, where they sort of had, even their kickoff was so extravagant. Then they had like an overload on one side that then rotated round and somehow they ended up in the right position for kickoff. And they gave their couple of turn ones doing that. But even so, it worked out a few times, and it was one of them where no one probably knew it, but even thought to do that. So you definitely do see different ideas. There's inevitably going to be different ideas that even different continents have. Like the Americans have always been very good at set pieces. The Argentinians have got that flair and are so aggressive and are so hard to sort of get the better of because of how passionate they are. And the same with the Uruguayans. So I think the thing was with South American teams is their club teams were almost the same as their national teams that I've played against in the past. So Club Nacional was pretty much the exact same as the Uruguay team from what I can remember. And then Argentina as well, like the main sort of frame of Javier Lopez and Valentino Zegarelli, who a lot of people would say are sort of the two standouts in that team. They were both there at the Club World Cup. So it was similar to when we played them at the World Cup, but obviously they would have developed new style like we did in the years since the World Cup. So it's always interesting, and obviously you can't play each other too often with the distances. So when we do then play them after a bit of time away to see whether it is a new kickoff routine or even just they've started to develop a slightly new style where they've watched what other countries are doing and taken things on. And I think the one thing I have definitely noticed is every time we get to one of those tournaments, you see people slowly starting to realise that when you spread the ball, that is the easiest way to score goals. I think you watch that every tournament, and each time more and more teams start trying to pass the ball. Where in the past it was sort of seen that you dribble your way up the pitch and only pass when you get to the final third. But you see a lot more teams now trying to play really fluid, sort of dynamic, long passes, and yeah, I think we all need to learn from each other because this sport's not been going nearly as long as football has. And if you look at football, the running game 30 years ago, it's completely different to how it is now. So I think it'd be naive to say that the sport's not going to change at all in this country or in other countries in another 10 years' time. Because 10 years ago, it was so different. It wasn't even the strike forces, I don't think, 10 years ago in England. So you never know what the sport's going to look like in another 10 years.
Well, just go back as far as when you first were introduced to the sport of Powerchair Football 8 years ago, and how you were going into the storm chairs and the older iterations, and you look at how much things have developed in that time alone, and we are seeing the quality of football in 2026 reflect that development over the last few years. And hopefully by the time Argentina comes around for the next World Cup and other competitions, we see teams be really brave and really go for it. So no, ultimately it didn't go your way in Paris on that occasion, but I can't have you completing club football at the age of 16. I need you to have something to shoot towards in the future and to keep you hungry, because you've picked up pretty much every other club trophy possible. And I think the next Club World Cup is 2029. So it means you've got to maintain your level for at least the next 3 years. Almost immediately after that competition, well, I think within 48 hours or so, you're straight back into another huge fixture, the 2025 Jonga Group WFA Cup final at St George's Park. And this is often where sport or Powerchair football tells you the most about people and teams, because there is no time to sit with the disappointment. There is no space to reflect. There is no chance to rest or reset properly. For both you and West Brom, it was always going to come down to one thing. You either carried the frustration with you or you responded to it. And from the outside, it felt like Aspire did the latter exactly. It was one of the more convincing cup final performances you've produced in recent years. And even if the scoreline didn't fully reflect that level of control, you personally put in a play out of the match performance and Aspire lift their 8th WFA Cup title. For me, it looked like the group had completely parked what happened in Paris and focused completely what was in front of you. How satisfying was that game? Was that performance, especially coming so soon after Paris?
Yeah, I think the fact it did come so soon after Paris, and some people didn't even have the time to go home. They literally had to go straight to a hotel after driving back on the Saturday morning to then make the journey on the Sunday to St George's. I think it definitely made it more satisfying, and I think it really built. They say you sort of everyone comes together in times of adversity. I think that was very true in that tournament because although it didn't go our way, I think because we felt like in certain situations we'd had tough luck and maybe we had faced a bit of adversity. That definitely brought us closer together, and we felt like if we can stick together even when it's not gone our way like that, then we've got such a tight bond. And I think that's how we sort of felt going into that game on Sunday. So we arrived and we had that mentality of we're going to sit together, and we felt like we deserved more from the Club World Cup. Maybe not to win it, but we at least felt like we should have been in the semi-finals and at least given ourselves a chance to get a bit further. And so getting that win in the cup final was amazing. Obviously doing it over West Brom, who've always been the old rival, was great as well. And I think just we sort of wanted to make up for the fact that we weren't able to produce what we wanted, and we didn't. It's not an Aspire performance to come fifth in a Club World Cup. We at least would have wanted to be in the semi-finals. So yeah, being able to put it right, I would say is the way to describe it. Being able to do that and sort of straight away without having to sort of rue over our mistakes from the Club World Cup was a really nice feeling and a really nice ending to the season where we sort of got a happy ending.
Yeah, it certainly was that. I mean, zooming out from that final, I want to talk more broadly about the WFA Cup because it feels like a competition that's grown and evolved massively over the last few years. Teams treat it so seriously now, and not just because it's a major trophy, it's the platform that comes with it, the opportunity to play at St George's Park, the chance to be on a mainstream broadcast, which you've experienced on a number of occasions now. And for that one fixture, you're not just representing your club, you're representing the entire sport, often to people who might be watching Powerchair football properly for the first time. And that brings a different kind of pressure. You're trying to win a cup final ultimately, but you're also conscious that you're showcasing what the sport is and what it can be. And for me, that is a shift we've seen in recent years. You spoke about the developments of the game and trying to be more entertaining. I think players collectively now, when it comes to that showcase, that final, they put the sport first. So often we've seen in major finals, notably at international level, there's a goal scored, then the ball is trapped and dribbled, and the football suffers massively. But the last 2, 3 WFA Cup finals and competitions as a whole, for that matter, have been incredible. How do you view the WFA Cup? Does it feel bigger because the platform, the exposure that come with it? And do you think there has been a shift that players really want to use that as a platform to showcase the wider sport?
I think definitely. I think the incentive of the Derby Cup day where everyone's got the headsets on, you've got the biggest crowds. I think it was Bring the Noise last year, wasn't it? And it was, I think, the biggest crowd for Powerchair football in this country. So and then also the finals on TNT and the big crowds at St George's. That's where people want to play. I certainly know that that's what I dreamed of as a kid, was playing in any sort of big occasion, no matter what sort of type of football it was. And I'm sure for every other player, that's the kind of games that they want to play at as well. So I think definitely the incentives that have come along in the last few years have increased the competition, and I think it is a great thing that people aren't clamming up in the final and making, and they are really. I think we did really try to make it a spectacle, and even even when we went ahead, we still tried to keep the game as open as we could and not rest on our laurels. We tried to obviously go again, get the second goal, and even at that point, we never wanted to just shut the game off completely, because at the end of the day, you win a cup and it's incredible, but you're not just playing to win the cup 1 year. You're playing for the future of the sport as well, which sounds like a bit of a massive statement to make. But if the sport's not entertaining, and that's the big game that people are most likely to watch, then you're not really I don't think you're doing your duty for the future of the sport. In terms of if you make it a really boring game and people say, oh, that's what Powerchair football is, people aren't going to invest in that and as a product, and they're not going to want to see that in the future. Whereas if you turn it over and it's 2-1 and there's a penalty and there's free flowing football and there's 2 goals in the first 10 minutes, that's exactly what people want to see, the entertainment value. And so I think West Brom did the same, and we definitely went for it. And yeah, so hopefully we did as much as we could for the rest of the Powerchair football community and making it a bigger game and elevating it in future years.
I think that goes without saying. Worth noting that the WFA Cup format is evolving for 25-26. So for the first time, the final will move to the Derby Arena, giving the competition a clear route, allowing clubs to contest for the new bespoke trophy, which I'm sure you're going to want to get your hands on, Dan. And now the FA Disability Cup weekend will effectively become the Community Shield style event for Powerchair football, with the WFA Cup winner facing the winners of the National League Premiership. So just another little bit of intrigue, another showpiece, and another, hopefully, incentive for teams. We've spoken about the overall quality of football, which continues to rise, improving year on year. We've seen new champions emerge, with Teesside lifting the title for the first time in their history back in June. On top of that, you've got teams like Leeds, Greenbank, Newcastle, all showing genuine title ambitions in recent seasons. And it's a league that's become far harder to win. Looking ahead, it's clear that you'll have clear aspirations of getting back to the top. But beyond that, league performances over the next few seasons carry even more weight, because qualification for the next for Champions Cup in 28 and the next Club World Cup in 29 will be dictated by what happens domestically. So for the fight for those places becomes a really interesting subplot alongside each title race. When you look at this season specifically, Aspire are top of the league, you're unbeaten, and on a personal level, you're the league's top goal scorer. How have you found the level compared to previous years?
It's the best season, yeah, and everyone says that every single year, and it sounds like a cliche, but it really isn't. Like when you're playing in it, and I'm sure when you're watching it as well, you really do notice it. The average quality in the league goes up so much. Like if you took the 6th best team in the league every single year, I'm sure if you played the 6th best team from this year against the 6th best team from 3 or 4 years ago, they'd absolutely smash them. And I think it's just the level overall has just improved so much. And you've got international players playing for teams all across the table from both England and other countries. And I think, yeah, you can't take any game as an easy game anymore. The league is just, you've got to be alert, you've got to be switched on for every single game. And if you don't, you're running the risk of slipping up and not getting the result you want. So, yeah, I think that there's so many strong teams up north. And I typically see that the teams up north, there's really physical teams and tough teams to play against. Then you've also got teams like Teesside, who sort of, I wouldn't see as a really physical team. They're just a team who are technically unbelievable. You've got Tyler, I saw that video of him going on his mazy run the other day on the WFA page. And so he's like one of the most technically gifted players that England have got. Ed also, obviously, an absolute magician. Then you've got Mitch, great young player. He's an absolute goal scorer through and through. Greg, obviously, is really solid foundation to build upon, very knowledgeable on the sport. So they're like a team where they've got that technical brilliance, and the Leeds have got a bit of a mix of both. Some of the best young players in the whole country. And like I say, I'd see Greenbank and Newcastle probably as slightly more physical teams who can in terms of they can bully any team in any game worldwide, I think. Because they're set up so well, and they just know, except they know the bits that maybe people don't notice, but whether that's hitting you on a kick in so that you can't get a front bumper across your other winger, and like setting their chair at an angle where you can't get to the ball, where other teams maybe wouldn't be switched on enough for that. And that was something I definitely noticed when we played against Newcastle in the last weekend. As much as they've lost Ethan Fish, when a lot of people would say that would weaken them a lot, I think Jamie Harrison does set them up really well for purpose. Like they're so defensively solid. Whereas not as much as you can get the ball across the box loads of times, they're so prepared for when it does get across that they've got like a barricade, a blockade, where you can't really score. And we needed a penalty in that game in the end to get over the line, despite sort of having loads of possession and chances in the first half. And yeah, the quality overall is unbelievable. And even the promoted teams try and play good football. I think that's really important. Like GVG and not to worry. I'd say especially I noticed GVG, because obviously we're in the West Midlands League with them now as well. No matter if it's a regional game, national game, no matter who they're playing against, they really do try and play a proper, fast, sort of England-esque brand of football, where maybe they're not necessarily getting their goalkeeper up and playing the 4 out, but they're definitely moving the ball, and you just see bits in every single team now, where maybe 2 or 3 years ago only the top players could do that. But now the skill level is so much higher that you've got players that are playing for teams in the bottom 3, pulling out skills and technique, and they're just as consistent as top players were 2 or 3 years ago. So every year, the teams that are maybe a bit lower down the table catch up. And yeah, I just think the sport's in a fantastic place, and if it keeps evolving like this, then it's a real product that I think anyone would want to sort of invest into. I think like obviously the sponsorships that the WFA have had in the last few years kind of speak for themselves, and the big events like this Derby Day and the Derby Cup Day, and just yeah, the overall quality in the league. As long as that keeps improving, then the sport kind of sells itself, and it's only gonna grow.
Yeah, I completely agree. To your point with that growing quality, when it comes to the league, how do you define success this season? Is lifting the trophy the only measure, or do you judge it in a different way?
I think you've got to have ambition. So for me, I would be disappointed not to win the league, and it's not that I think we should win the league. It's more that just I think the minute you sort of let yourself slip away from the ambition, like our ambition at the start of the season, we knew how strong Teesside would be, Green Rank, Leeds. I mean, you knew West Brom and Newcastle would be in and around the top 6, but we didn't really see them maybe quite as much as title contenders, just because they're in that rebuild phase with a slightly younger team and have lost big players in Dylan and Ethan. But I think we would have said at the start of the season, definitely we want to win the league. And then after our first 2 weekends, obviously our ambitions not really changed. We've not slipped up massively. You could argue we've had the 2 draws, which weren't the best results, but obviously beating Teesside in the first weekend is big for us. But yeah, we've had a lot of potential banana skins in Newcastle, Villa, then obviously going 1-0 down to Greenbank at the last weekend is a situation I don't think many teams would be able to come back against, with how strong a lot of their players are defensively. Like Toby's a very tactically smart player, Jacob's really solid, never really makes a mistake, and Marcus is fantastic at locking the game up. So I think we've had results that we've been proud of, and I think I would be disappointed if we don't win the league, because as soon as you sort of let yourself drop those ambitions is when the complacency sets in, and you maybe don't then put pressure on yourself enough in the future, and you sort of stay stagnant and don't really get anywhere. So I'd like to say that I'd be disappointed if we don't win the league, but I do know one thing for sure, and that's that if we don't win the league, it will be because we can't blame ourselves fully. There's 2 absolutely fantastic teams, or 3 even really, that are in the title race with us. And when you've got the team it's like the Galacticos at Leeds, the Real Madrid Galacticos, they've built an absolute super team. Dan Rigby's like one of the most consistent players in the Premier League over the last few years. Everyone knows Dylan's quality from both West Brom in the last few years in England. Ethan's one of the best middle players in the country, and he's now playing that slightly deeper role that he's played in England camps in it as well. And then obviously Lewis was fantastic last year for Leeds, so that's an absolute super team with then 2 absolute goal scorers on the bench that can come on and score a 5 and a hat trick like I've seen Jack Maxwell do a couple of times this year. So and then obviously I've spoken about Teesside and their quality. So I think we would define success as probably winning the title this season, because we've obviously not won it the last 2 years, and I think we probably, like, last season was, we probably had a bit of our rebuild last season, like we said, West Brom and Newcastle having this year. And it wasn't maybe to the same extent that West Brom are going through this year, but obviously we came 3rd, which isn't, I don't think Aspire had been outside the top 2 for quite a good while before that. I wouldn't know the exact stat, but definitely not whilst I had been there before that. It'd only ever been 1st or 2nd. So it was a disappointing season, but it was one where Brad had left. And I think John Dixon was learning the new role, and it was a combination of different factors. Maybe we had a bit of complacency after the Champions League. I think John spoke about it in his podcast episode, where he felt that maybe if we could win the Champions League, we could beat anyone, so we didn't maybe prepare as well as we should have. And I think for me, last season was a real transition in terms of learning how to deal with more responsibility, because at the age that I was at, I then sort of became the second in line in terms of, if John wasn't there at a training session or at a regionals, I was one that was expected to take charge and lead the session or coach the team and be the captain. And if John wasn't on the pitch, I had to be the one that people could turn to. And obviously that's difficult when you're still trying to focus on yourself at that age. But I think last season, although we didn't perform as well as we maybe could have, I felt like personally I learned a lot about how to be a better sort of leader. And yeah, I just think sometimes it can be probably underestimated how hard it is to be like Chris or John, where you're a player coach and you captain a team and you've got to be the focal point for everyone to turn to, because even when you're just not having as good a game as you want to, and then you've got to still try and be positive with everyone else and keep talking and reinforcing and telling people where to be, and it does get really tricky. So I think I'm definitely trying to hone that skill a bit, even still, and I probably will be for as long as I'm playing, because you can never really you can always improve. You never reach like a final standard of being a leader. So I guess that's probably what I want to carry on trying to do this year. And because obviously John's not going to be about forever, that's inevitable. He's been Mr. Aspire for however long they've been around. I think 23, 24 years. I think 2002 Aspire was founded. So there's got to be someone that's ready to sort of try and be the next leader. So I can't say anything for certain, but I would like to try and then do that if I can. But I think trying to do that now and learn as much as I can from him and his leadership skills is probably the best way to go about it. So yeah, last year was a challenging year as a team and personally, getting to grips with the more responsibility I had and being a shoulder for people to lean on. No matter, even if I wasn't happy myself, I had to put on a brave face, and if I wasn't happy with how I was performing, still be there for other people. So I definitely, and there's definitely things that didn't go well in that sense, where maybe I wasn't having a good game, so I snapped at someone else, or I didn't necessarily give the best advice because I was focused. Because it is easy to focus too much on yourself. You're so focused on your role in the game that you then don't give the necessary communication that someone else needs at the same time. And so that's definitely something I think I've learned from. And yeah, there's always going to be things to learn from, but yeah, the Premiership's a great place to do that.
On that point, do you still feel like a player with a point to prove, or do you now feel more like you're carrying the weight of being someone others look to?
It's so hard to say because I think you've always got a point to prove in that you could never really settle for what you've got, and it's always good to try and be grounded and and try and be better. But I do see myself. I try and and portray myself as someone that people can turn to in the sense of being vocal. Like I always want to be someone, even if it's not necessarily because of how I'm performing on the pitch or off the pitch. I want to be someone who's quite stable for my teammates and yeah, even but it's not necessarily about being on the pitch having a point to prove. But I definitely feel like I've got a point to prove off the pitch because I feel like I can try and be a good leader off the pitch. But you've got to consistently do that. It's not something where it's not like if you have a good match, you've proved yourself. You've got to be a leader consistently through good times and bad times. And so that's probably my next target because it also will help John if I can be more of a leader. It's again, like I spoke about, with people being able to play in the middle. It takes pressure off him, and hopefully it will just help the team out as well.
Okay, Dan, that was a great summary. I'm very conscious of time that we're approaching 2 hours now, and we haven't even delved into one of the most significant parts of your journey, of your career, being your international experience and the whole England program. So what we're going to do, we'll split it into 2 parts. We will clip this one together, release this, and then we'll get together again in the coming days to record part 2, if that's okay with you.
100%.
I'm considerate. We could talk for hours and hours about Powerchair football and let the world go by, but I'm trying to be kind to our listeners and put it in manageable chunks. So before we wrap up this episode, I want to finish on a quick fire round. We've covered a lot. The journey into club football, National League experience, the expectations, the big moments. So let's end on something a little bit lighter. So if you're ready, short, instinctive answers, okay?
Yeah.
Proudest moment in Powerchair football at club level?
The cup final this year, scoring a goal and getting man of the match.
Yeah, fantastic. Toughest opponent you've faced? Club football only, remember.
Momo Galami, Upsilon, 100%.
No, okay, yeah, that is very, very good. Most nervous you've been before a club game?
Probably the title deciding game in my first ever sort of title race, the one we won the league. Just before that game.
Yeah, fantastic. One part of your game you're still desperate to improve?
Probably my strength in dribbling, becoming more physical and adding that to my game as well as sort of the passing side.
Yeah. One rule you tweak in Powerchair football?
Make the 2-on-1 rule favour the attacking team a bit more. Maybe make it a bit more lenient for the attacking team to keep the game moving.
Yeah, many have said that. One stadium or venue you dream of playing in?
Or get a little sports hall floor down in the Santiago Bernabeu, I reckon.
Very nice. And to finish, Fantasy 4, if you could pick a team with 3 players you've never played with at club level before, who are you picking?
3 players.
And you've got be considerate of chemistry, positions. So assume you can choose wide or centre where you want to play.
I'd love to play out on the wing.
Okay,
So
tell me your central.
Is this just domestically?
Domestically, yes.
So I think I think I've got to put Chris in goal. I think it'd kill me if I didn't. And obviously we want to play that nice 4-out brand. So I'll put Chris as our sweeper keeper.
Nice.
I'll go with Tyler in the middle.
Yep.
He's an absolute magician. And then I don't know who to choose. It's a tough one on the other wing because no matter who I don't choose, I'm going to get absolutely slaughtered at England in the next few weeks. But
There's one answer for me. Considering that team you've got,
I think I'm going to have to put Ed in because I absolutely love Ed. And I think the season he had last season is probably one of the most dominant individual seasons I've ever seen. So I'm going to put Ed in.
interesting. I was thinking Dylan Kelsall.
I knew it was between them two for me. I was never going to put Marcus in. He'll hate me for that. But it was between those two. But I think it was one of them where you've got Tyler and he'll do all the dirty work. And then I don't think we really need the dirty work as much. So get it out to Ed and let him do a couple of flicks and tricks, I think.
No, I agree completely. And referencing Ed last season, he was spectacular. But you need to try and nullify that for the remaining games in the 25-26 season. Dan, that brings us to the end of episode 44 of the 2-1 Powerchair Football Podcast. Thank you very much. As mentioned, this will be part 1 of 2. So we will get together next week probably to unpack your journey with England, the pathway. I want to delve into elements like your family and the expectations of being such a prominent player at such a young age. Of course, a massive thank you to MK Battery for powering this podcast and for their commitment to making a real difference in the sport and the community around it. A huge thank you to all our listeners. And finally, a big thank you to Dan.
Thank you.